The black man who couldn't fill up his car. Smoke rose in spirals from Marcus Williams' cigarette as he gazed at the landscape through the window of his 1962 Cadillac Eldorado. The gleaming, imposing vehicle glided down the dusty Alabama road, cutting through the suffocating heat of that summer in 1963. Cotton fields stretched into the distance, constantly reminding him of where he came from and how hard he had fought to get here. Those same fields where his grandfather had toiled as a slave and his father as a sharecropper now stood as silent witnesses to the changes slowly taking place across America, changes that men like Marcus were pushing forward. One small victory at a time, Marcus adjusted his impeccably tailored suit and checked the gold watch on his wrist, a gift from the Chamber of Commerce when he opened his 10th station. He was early for his meeting in Montgomery, but the fuel gauge indicated he needed to refill. The irony wasn't lost on him. A man who built his fortune on gasoline might soon find himself stranded without it. Birmingham had been left behind almost 2 hours ago, its streets still echoing with the sounds of protest. Just months earlier, Dr. King had been arrested there, penning his famous letter from jail. The civil rights movement was bubbling throughout the South, but for men like Marcus, who navigated between two worlds, that of white business and the reality of being black in America, each stop was a test, each interaction a potential confrontation. Different worlds, Marcus muttered to himself, taking a final drag from his cigarette before flicking it out the window. He'd become adept at code switching, speaking one way in boardrooms filled with white executives and another when among his community. It was exhausting but necessary. The weight of his success came with responsibilities he never asked for, but couldn't decline. Marcus had built an empire of gas stations, the Williams Fuel Company, starting with a single pump 15 years ago when he returned from the war. Like many black soldiers, he'd fought for freedom abroad, only to find it scarce at home. But unlike many, he'd managed to secure a small business loan. Leveraging the respect of a white officer he'd served with overseas. "You saved my life in France, Williams," Major Thomas had told him at the bank that day. "Least I can do is vouch for your character." That single pump had grown to 5, then 10, then dozens of establishments spread across 5 states. Now he employed over 200 people, white and black alike, though finding managers willing to work for a black owner had been its own battle. His business acumen had been featured in Jet magazine, and he'd even been invited to a White House business roundtable during the Kennedy administration, seated at the back of the room. Of course, but present nonetheless. Ironically, there were still places he couldn't enter, bathrooms he couldn't use, and people who refused to believe that a black man could own anything beyond debts. Just last month, he'd been denied entry to a hotel in Georgia where he was scheduled to deliver a keynote address to a business association. He'd given the speech in the parking lot instead, the white attendees awkwardly standing in the summer heat rather than invite him inside. His secretary, Martha, had urged him to take the company plane for this trip, but Marcus insisted on driving. "I need to see it, Martha," he'd explained. "See the country I'm building in. Can't do that from 10,000 feet up." The real reason, which he kept to himself, was simpler. Flying meant depending on others, and dependence was dangerous for a black man in America. No matter how wealthy, he spotted the gas station on the roadside. The letters on the sign faded by Alabama's unforgiving sun. Clayton's Gas and Service, it proclaimed in chipped red paint. A tattered American flag hung limply in the still air. It wasn't one of his, he immediately realized, but necessity spoke louder. The gauge was almost empty, and the next town was more than 40 miles away. Marcus slowed down and pulled into the station, parking next to the pump. He immediately noticed the attendant's look, a white man, thin, middle-aged, with suspenders over a shirt yellowed by sweat. His eyes narrowed at the sight of the luxury car with a black driver. It was a look Marcus had catalogued in his mental library of prejudices. Surprise, followed by suspicion, followed by the hardening that came with the assumption that something wasn't right in the natural order of things. Marcus took a deep breath. He knew that look, that hesitation, that assessment. Even with his success, his money, his knowledge, even being the man who employed dozens of whites at his stations, he was still just a black man in the eyes of many. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "They'll let you have money, son, but not respect. That you gotta take for yourself." He adjusted his tie, put on his hat, and exited the car, walking with the dignity his mother had taught him to maintain, no matter what happened. Her words from childhood came back to him. "Stand straight, Marcus. Walk like you belong. Never let them see you bend." "Good morning," said Marcus, with the polite and firm voice he used in business meetings. "Could you fill up the tank, please?" The attendant didn't move. His eyes scanned the luxurious car, then returned to Marcus, suspicious. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken accusations. "Where'd you get that car, boy?" he asked, without hiding the disdain in his voice. The word boy hung in the air, deliberately diminishing, a reminder of place and position. Marcus felt the familiar heat of indignation rising up his neck, but kept his face impassive. He had learned too early that showing anger was dangerous for a man like him. His first business had been vandalized the night after he'd argued with a white supplier. The police report listed it as unknown perpetrators, despite the racial slurs painted across the broken windows. "The car is mine," he replied simply. "I'm headed to Montgomery and I need fuel." The man let out a short laugh, looking at the other employee who appeared at the convenience store door. A younger man, perhaps in his 20s, with the same suspicious gaze but less weathered features. Family business, Marcus surmised. Father and son, carrying prejudice down through generations like a treasured heirloom. "Hear that, Bill? He says the Cadillac is his." The older man turned back to Marcus, the smile replaced by a hard expression. "Listen here, I don't know who you stole this car from or who you're driving for, but we don't fill up cars for colored folks here, especially when we know something ain't right about the story." Bill stepped forward, thumbs hooked in his belt loops, a posture of casual authority. "That's a mighty fine automobile. Whose is it, really? You the chauffeur? Your boss know you're joyriding?" Marcus looked around. They were alone on the road, except for a truck parked in the back. He considered his options. He could show his documents, prove the car was his, maybe even mention he owned a chain of gas stations. But experience told him that could worsen the situation. Men like that attendant didn't like being proved wrong, especially by a black man. Pride, wounded by correction, was a dangerous thing in these parts. "I understand," Marcus finally said, his voice controlled, each word measured carefully. "Is there another station nearby?" The older man smiled, victorious. "The next one's 40 miles away. No doubt you'll make it there with that tank." He pointed to the gauge visible through the car window. "But that ain't my problem, is it?" Bill laughed, a harsh sound in the quiet afternoon. "Maybe you can call your boss to come rescue you when you're stranded. If he'll still have you after taking his car." Marcus returned to the car, closing the door with calculated care not to show the anger he felt. Inside the private cocoon of his vehicle, he allowed himself a moment of pure fury, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. Then he exhaled slowly, releasing the emotion with practiced discipline. He looked at the portrait of his family on the dashboard, his wife Diana and their 2 children Malcolm and Ruby, and remembered why he swallowed these insults. For them, so that one day his children wouldn't have to go through the same. Diana had wanted to come with him on this trip, but he'd insisted she stay home. "It's just business," he'd told her, knowing full well it was never just business. Every mile he drove into the deep south was a calculated risk, every interaction layered with potential danger. Better she didn't see what he endured. Better she didn't have to sit beside him, absorbing the hateful stares meant for them both. He started the engine and slowly left the station, eyes fixed on the road ahead. In the rear-view mirror, he saw the 2. Men laughing, probably betting on how long it would take before he ran out of gas in the middle of nowhere. Marcus smiled slightly. They didn't know he always carried an emergency gallon in the trunk, a lesson he had learned the first time he was refused at a gas station 10 years earlier. Never again. he had promised himself then. Never be at their mercy. As he drove, Marcus reflected on the contrasts of his life. In his office in Atlanta, he was treated with deference by executives who wanted to do business with his expanding company. Just last week, 3 white businessmen had waited in his reception for over an hour, nervously checking their watches, but not daring to complain. In meetings with bankers, he was Mr. Williams, the visionary businessman who had transformed a single station into a profitable network. But here on the road, he was just another Negro who should know his place. The irony didn't escape him, being barred from refueling at a station when he owned dozens of them. It was a perfect metaphor for the America he inhabited, allowed to build the very establishments that might refuse to serve him. His mind drifted back to last Christmas, when Malcolm, his 10-year-old son, had asked a question that pierced his heart. "Daddy, why do some white kids at school say you can't really own all those gas stations?" Jimmy Taylor said his father told him it must be a white man letting you pretend. Marcus had struggled to find the words. How do you explain to a child the tangled web of prejudice and power without extinguishing their hope? How do you prepare them for a world determined to limit them without making them bitter before they've had a chance to dream? "Some people can't imagine what they haven't seen before," he'd finally answered. "We're showing them something new, son. And new things take time to accept." After a few miles, Marcus found a safe place to stop, a gravel turnout partially hidden by pine trees. He opened the trunk and took out the fuel canister he always carried. 5 gallons, enough to get him to friendlier territory. As he manually refueled his car under the scorching sun, sweat soaking through his expensive suit, he made a silent promise to himself. One day he would buy that station. Not for revenge, but to ensure no one else would be humiliated as he was today. The heat was oppressive, the air thick with humidity that made breathing feel like drowning. Marcus loosened his tie and removed his jacket, carefully folding it over his arm despite the circumstances. His father had taught him that appearance was armor for a black man. They'll judge you no matter what, so give them less ammunition. As he poured the last of the emergency fuel into his tank, a pickup truck slowed on the road, the white driver eyeing him suspiciously. Marcus nodded politely, maintaining the careful etiquette of the road. Acknowledge but don't engage, be visible but not threatening. The truck accelerated away, dust billowing in its wake. Marcus checked his watch. The detour had cost him 20 minutes. He'd still make his meeting, but with less margin for error. He slid back into the driver's seat, wiping his forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief, another gift, this one from Diana on their anniversary. MW in elegant blue stitching, a small acknowledgement of his humanity in a world that often denied it. He thought about his upcoming meeting in Montgomery. The Williams Fuel Company was poised to acquire a chain of stations in Mississippi, expanding his reach into a state notorious for its hostility toward black advancement. His lawyers had advised setting up a holding company with a white front man to smooth the process. But Marcus had refused. "If they won't sell to me as I am, they won't sell to me at all," he'd declared, dismissing their concerned expressions. It wasn't idealism, but calculation. Marcus knew that visibility mattered. Every business transaction conducted in his own name chipped away at the edifice of segregation. Every deed signed by his hand created a paper trail that couldn't be erased. Evidence that black success wasn't just possible but actual. The landscape rolled by, red soil and green pines creating a tapestry of color beneath the clear blue sky. Alabama could be beautiful when you weren't reminded of its ugliness. He turned on the radio, catching the middle of a news report about demonstrations in Selma. More arrests, more violence, more brave souls putting their bodies on the line for freedom. Marcus wasn't on the front lines of those protests. His battle was fought in boardrooms and bank offices, with contracts and capital rather than placards and protest songs. Sometimes he wondered if it was enough, if his path of economic resistance carried the same moral weight as those who faced fire hoses and police dogs. Diana assured him it did. "We're fighting the same war on different fronts," she'd say. They're changing hearts, you're changing wallets. Both matter. Diana understood him better than anyone. The daughter of a prominent black doctor in Atlanta, she'd grown up with privileges many in their community never experienced. Yet she remained grounded, running a free clinic in their neighborhood 3 days a week, despite her training as a concert pianist. They'd met at a fundraiser for the NAACP, where Marcus had been too intimidated by her beauty and education to approach her, until she'd finally approached him. "I hear you're the man who's putting our people to work all across the South," she'd said, extending her hand. "I think that's worth a conversation, don't you?" 7 years and 2 children later, she remained his anchor and his compass. When discrimination wore him down, when doors closed in his face despite the money in his pockets, Diana reminded him of the bigger picture. Every no you receive and overcome is a yes for someone coming after you, she'd tell him. Marcus Williams wasn't just a businessman. He was a man with a mission, and each insult, each closed door, each discrimination only strengthened his determination. He would move forward as he always did, but he would never forget. And more importantly, he would transform that pain into something greater than himself. With the tank partially filled, he continued his journey to Montgomery, where he would close the deal that would expand his business to Mississippi. The Cadillac cut through the road, taking him to a future he was determined to build, not just for himself, but for all those who would come after him. A future where a man's worth wouldn't be measured by the color of his skin, but by the content of his character and his accomplishments. The outskirts of Montgomery came into view as the afternoon sun began its descent. Marcus had visited the city many times before, watching its transformation from the epicenter of bus boycotts to a reluctant symbol of changing times. The memory of Rosa Parks and the thousands who walked rather than accept humiliation was embedded in the city's streets. Invisible to some but palpable to him, he passed the state capitol building, its white dome gleaming in the sunlight, a monument to a Confederacy that still lived in many hearts and minds. Just 6 years earlier, Martin Luther King Jr. had led marches to those very steps, culminating the Selma to Montgomery March. Progress came slowly here, measured in inches rather than miles, but it came nonetheless. Marcus spotted one of his own stations in the distance, the sight lifting his spirits. The Williams Fuel Company logo, a stylized W with a flame rising from its center, shone under the afternoon sun. It was one of his newer acquisitions, purchased just last year from a white owner facing bankruptcy. Marcus had kept all the staff on, even the manager who'd initially refused to meet with the colored owner. He pulled into the parking lot and was greeted with a smile by the young white attendant, who didn't recognize the company owner. "Full tank, sir?" asked the young man without hesitation. No suspicion in his eyes, no hesitation in his service. Just a transaction between a customer and an employee. "Yes, please," replied Marcus, watching the young man carefully. His name tag read Tommy, and he couldn't have been more than 19, with freckles scattered across his sunburned face. "You from around here, sir?" Tommy asked conversationally as he began pumping the gas, seemingly unbothered by serving a black customer. It was a small thing, this basic courtesy, but it struck Marcus deeply after his earlier encounter. "Atlanta, actually. Just here on business," Marcus replied, deciding to test the waters further. "I'm here to close a deal for Williams Fuel Company." Tommy's eyes lit up with recognition. "Hey, that's us. You doing business with Mr. Williams?" He looked around excitedly, as if expecting to see someone else. "Is he here too?" The question brought a small smile to Marcus's lips. "You've never met?" "Mr. Williams? No, sir, but I hear he's quite something. My manager, Mr. Hendricks, says he's the smartest businessman he's ever met." Tommy leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Between you and me, I think Mr. Hendricks was surprised about. You know, him being colored and all. But now he won't hear a word against him. Says Mr. Williams gave him a chance when nobody else would after his drinking problem." Marcus nodded, filing away this information about his manager. He made a mental note to look into Hendricks' file when he returned to Atlanta. He didn't recall any mention of a drinking problem, but then again, he had dozens of managers across his stations. "That's so," Marcus replied neutrally. "And what do you think about working for a colored owner?" Tommy shrugged, replacing the gas cap. "Honestly, sir, my daddy lost his job at the steel mill last year. We were about to lose our house when I got hired here. Mr. Williams pays better than any other station in town, and we get health insurance too. My little sister needed an operation last month, and it didn't cost us a dime." He wiped his hands on a rag. "Far as I'm concerned, Mr. Williams could be purple with green spots, and I'd still say he's a good man." The simple honesty in the young man's words affected Marcus more than he expected. It was a reminder that change happened person by person, interaction by interaction. Not everyone was Clayton and his son Bill, determined to maintain the old hierarchies. Some, like Tommy, judged a man by his actions rather than his color. While the attendant filled the car, Marcus got out and walked to the convenience store, where a photo of him with the governor at that station's inauguration was hanging on the wall. It was a carefully staged photo op. The governor needed to appear progressive to northern investors while still maintaining his segregationist credentials with his base. Politics made for strange bedfellows indeed. The manager, Hendricks, who recognized him immediately, came running from the back office. He was a tall man with a receding hairline and a paunch that strained his uniform shirt, but his eyes were clear and alert. "Mr. Williams, we weren't expecting you today. What an honor to have you here." Hendricks extended his hand for a firm handshake, then quickly ushered Marcus into his small office. "Can I get you some coffee? Water? We just got in some new sandwiches from that deli you recommended." "I'm fine, thank you, Mr. Hendricks," Marcus said, taking a seat. "Just passing through on my way to a meeting. Thought I'd see how things were running." "Revenue's up 15% from last quarter," Hendricks said proudly. "And we've implemented that community program you suggested, offering free oil changes to church vans and buses. It's brought in a lot of goodwill, especially from the colored churches in the area." Marcus nodded approvingly. "And the staff integration? Any issues?" Hendricks hesitated briefly. "Some initial grumbling from a couple of the older employees about working alongside colored staff, but I made it clear, it's Mr. Williams' way or the highway. They came around when they saw how good Jackson is with engine repairs. Man's a genius with a carburetor." Outside, Tommy had finished filling the Cadillac and was now cleaning the windshield meticulously. He glanced toward the store with a puzzled expression, clearly wondering about the prolonged conversation between his manager and the well-dressed black customer. "Your young attendant out there, Tommy, seems like a good employee," Marcus observed. "One of our best," Hendricks confirmed. "Never late, always polite to customers. His father worked at Wilson Steel for 20 years before they laid him off. Good family, fallen on hard times." Marcus made another mental note. Perhaps there was an opportunity there, a way to help Tommy's father find new employment. The Williams Industrial Supply Division was always looking for experienced steel workers. The bell above the store door jingled, and Tommy entered looking uncertain. "Excuse me, Mr. Hendricks, but—" His eyes darted between his manager and Marcus, confusion evident. Hendricks smiled broadly. "Tommy, I'd like you to meet Mr. Marcus Williams, owner of Williams Fuel Company and, well, this entire station." The attendant who was filling the car heard and looked confused at the elegant black man he had just served. His eyes widened when he realized he was in the presence of the owner of the gas station chain. "You're Mr. Williams?" Tommy stammered, his freckles standing out against his suddenly pale face. "But I didn't. It's a pleasure to meet you, Tommy," Marcus said, extending his hand. "I hear you've been doing excellent work here." Tommy took the offered hand automatically, still processing the revelation. "I'm so sorry, sir, if I'd known who you were." "You'd have done exactly what you did, provided good, courteous service to a customer," Marcus finished for him. "That's all any of us can ask for." A slow smile spread across Tommy's face as understanding dawned. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." Marcus smiled, not with arrogance, but with the quiet certainty of someone who knew both hatred and respect, and knew that the latter would eventually overcome the former. Even if he had to buy every gas station in the state of Alabama to make it happen, one Tommy at a time, one changed mind at a time. "I'm going to need the exact address of a station I saw on the road," Marcus told the manager. "Clayton's Gas and Service, about 40 miles back toward Birmingham." Hendricks frowned. "Clayton's? That old place run by Earl Clayton and his boy?" "With all due respect, Mr. Williams, that station is hardly worth your attention. It's run down, loses business every month to the new interstate, and Clayton himself is." He trailed off, diplomatically avoiding stating the obvious about the owner's character. "Nevertheless, I want it," Marcus said firmly. "Can you find me that information, and any financial details you might have from industry reports?" Hendricks nodded, not questioning further. He'd worked for Marcus long enough to know that the businessman rarely made decisions without careful consideration. "I'll have it all ready for you after your meeting. Will you be coming back this way?" "I will," Marcus confirmed, checking his watch. "I should go. Don't want to keep the investors waiting." He turned to Tommy, who was still standing nearby, looking somewhat awestruck. "It was good to meet you, young man. Keep up the excellent work." Back in his Cadillac, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose as he drove toward the downtown office where his meeting would take place. The encounter with Clayton had shaken him, more than he cared to admit, bringing back memories of countless similar humiliations throughout his life. But his visit to his own station had restored his equilibrium, reminding him of what he was building. Not just a business empire, but a different kind of South. The meeting went smoothly, the Mississippi businessmen eager to sell their chain of stations to his growing company. Only one, an older man with a Colonel Sanders beard and suspenders, seemed uncomfortable dealing directly with Marcus. "I must say, Mr. Williams, when my partners told me about this opportunity, I was surprised to learn about your background," the man said carefully as contracts were being signed. Marcus looked up, pen poised above the paper. "My background? Well, you know," the man hedged, glancing at his colleagues for support. "Your people don't typically. I mean, it's unusual to see one of in your position." The room fell uncomfortably silent. Marcus set down his pen deliberately. "My background is in petroleum distribution and retail management, Mr. Beauregard," he said evenly. "I started with one station and now own 67 across 5 states. My company employs over 200 people of all races and serves thousands of customers daily. That's the only background relevant to our transaction today." He picked up the pen again. "Now, shall we continue, or would you prefer to reconsider the sale?" The other investors shot warning glances at Beauregard, who quickly backpedaled. No, of course not. Just making conversation. Please, let's proceed." 2 hours later, with contracts signed and hands shaken, Marcus was the new owner of 12 additional stations across Mississippi. It was a significant expansion, one that would require careful management and likely face resistance in some communities. But resistance was nothing new to Marcus Williams. As promised, he returned to his Montgomery station before heading back to Atlanta. Hendricks had compiled a detailed report on Clayton's Gas and Service: location, financial status, property value, and outstanding debts. "Clayton's been falling behind on his loan payments," Hendricks explained. "Bank's been patient because he's local, but my contact there says they're reaching their limit. Station's barely breaking even, and equipment's outdated. Wouldn't take much to push it over the edge." Marcus reviewed the documents thoughtfully. "Contact our friends at First National. See if they can acquire Clayton's loan from the local bank. Don't mention my name or Williams Fuel Company. Just a standard loan acquisition. You're going to foreclose on him?" Hendricks asked, surprised. "It wasn't Marcus's usual method of acquisition, no," Marcus said, a plan forming in his mind. I'm going to teach him a lesson about business, and perhaps something more. He looked up at his manager. When's the last time you took a vacation, Hendricks? The manager blinked at the sudden change of topic. Vacation? Well, it's been a few years, sir. Been focused on getting this station running properly. Take 2 weeks, starting next Monday. Full pay, of course. Visit that sister of yours in Chicago you're always talking about. But, sir, who'll manage the station? Marcus smiled. I think I can handle it for a couple of weeks. Consider it my way of getting to know the Montgomery operation better. On the drive back to Atlanta that evening, Marcus finalized his plan. It was bold, perhaps even risky, but the potential reward, not financial but moral, was worth it. Diana would understand, even if she worried about him spending 2 weeks in Montgomery, a city with a complicated relationship with civil rights. As darkness fell and the lights of Atlanta appeared on the horizon, Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Today, he had been refused service because of his skin color. But tomorrow, and all the tomorrows after, he would continue building a world where such refusals became unthinkable. Not through protest or politics, though those had their place, but through the quiet power of economic change. The Williams Fuel Company would expand, station by station, state by state, creating jobs and serving communities regardless of color. And one day, perhaps not in his lifetime but in his children's, the Earl Claytons of the world would be relics of a bygone era, their prejudice as outdated as steam engines and horse-drawn carriages. 2 weeks later, Earl Clayton stared at the letter from First National Bank with disbelief and growing anger. His loan had been sold, and the new terms required immediate payment of 3 months of arrears or face foreclosure proceedings. "This is highway robbery," he sputtered to his son Bill, waving the paper in the air. "They can't do this. We've been with Macon County Bank for 20 years. "What are we going to do, Pa?" Bill asked, worry creasing his young face. "We don't have that kind of money sitting around." Clayton slumped into a chair behind the register. Business had been slow for months, the new interstate diverting traffic away from their once busy route. The station's equipment was aging, repairs eating into their already thin margins. "And now this. We'll figure something out," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. "Always have before." The bell above the door jingled, and both men looked up to see a tall black man in an expensive suit enter the store. It took Clayton a moment to recognize him as the same man he'd turned away 2 weeks earlier, the one with the Cadillac who'd claimed to own it. "What do you want?" Clayton demanded, instantly hostile. "Told you before, we don't serve your kind here." Marcus Williams stepped forward calmly, setting his briefcase on the counter. "Actually, Mr. Clayton, I'm not here for gas today. I'm here about your loan situation." Clayton's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "How do you know about my loan?" "Because I'm the one who bought it," Marcus said simply, opening his briefcase and removing a folder of documents. "Marcus Williams, President and CEO of Williams Fuel Company." He extended a business card, which Clayton ignored. "This some kind of joke?" Bill interjected. "You expect us to believe a colored man owns a fuel company?" In response, Marcus laid out several newspaper clippings and photos, Marcus shaking hands with the governor, Marcus cutting the ribbon at a news station opening, a feature article in the Atlanta Business Chronicle about the rising black entrepreneur revolutionizing the Southern fuel industry. Earl Clayton's face paled as realization dawned. You're really the owner of 67 gas stations across the South, soon to be 68, Marcus confirmed. Or perhaps not, depending on how our conversation goes today. Clayton's shock gave way to defiance. "Come to gloat, have you? Get your revenge for being turned away? Well, go ahead and foreclose." "We won't beg," Marcus shook his head. "I'm not here for revenge, Mr. Clayton. I'm here to offer you a business proposition." He pulled out a contract. Williams Fuel Company is prepared to purchase Clayton's gas and service for a fair market price, plus 10%. You and your son would be offered positions as employees should you wish to stay on, work for a colored man. Bill scoffed. "My pa would rather die." But Clayton was staring at the numbers on the contract, his business sense warring with his prejudice. The offer was more than fair. It was generous. More than he could hope to get in a foreclosure situation. Why? He finally asked, looking up at Marcus. Why would you help us after how we treated you? Marcus considered the question carefully. Because business isn't personal, Mr. Clayton, and because I believe people can change when given the right opportunity. And if we refuse, then the bank forecloses in 30 days, and I'll likely purchase the property at auction for half what I'm offering you now, Marcus said matter-of-factly. But I'd prefer this way. Less paperwork. The humor fell flat in the tense atmosphere. Clayton stared at the contract for a long moment, years of ingrained prejudice battling with financial reality. I need time to think, he said finally. Marcus nodded, closing his briefcase. You have 24 hours. I'll be at the Williams station in Montgomery until tomorrow evening. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, and Mr. Clayton, I recommend you think about more than just the money. Think about the world your son will inherit. Is it the one you grew up in or the one that's coming? The next day, as Marcus was preparing to return to Atlanta, Earl Clayton's truck pulled up outside the Montgomery station. The older man entered alone, his face set in grim determination. I'll sell, he said without preamble, but I won't work for you. Too old to change my ways that much. Marcus nodded, unsurprised. And your son? Clayton hesitated. Bill. He needs a job. If your offer still stands for him, I'd ask you to consider it. Boy's got a hot head but a good heart underneath. The offer stands, Marcus confirmed, though he'll need to understand our company policies about treating all customers with respect, regardless of color. He'll learn, Clayton said, a hint of resignation in his voice. World's changing whether we like it or not. As they finalized the paperwork, Clayton grew curious despite himself. You own all these stations yourself? No white partners pulling the strings. Marcus smiled slightly. Built from the ground up, Mr. Clayton. Started with one pump after coming back from serving our country in the war. You served? Clayton looked surprised. 1st Airborne. Jumped into Normandy on D-Day. A flicker of something, not quite respect but perhaps recognition, crossed Clayton's face. My brother was at Normandy. Never came back. For a moment, they were just two men who had witnessed the same historical moment from different perspectives, connected by the strange threads of American history. I'm sorry for your loss, Marcus said sincerely. Clayton nodded awkwardly, then signed the final document transferring ownership of his family business. Well, that's that then. As Clayton turned to leave, Marcus called after him. Mr. Clayton, may I ask you something? That day when I came to your station, if you had known who I was, would you have filled my tank? The older man paused, considering. Probably, he admitted. For the money, if nothing else. And now, Clayton looked back, meeting Marcus's eyes directly for perhaps the first time. Now I'd do it because a man deserves service, regardless of who he is or what he owns. Took losing everything to see that. Funny how that works, isn't it? With that, he walked out, leaving Marcus to reflect on the strange journey that had brought them both to this moment. It wasn't a complete transformation. Clayton would likely carry his prejudices to the grave, but it was something. A crack in the foundation of hate, a small step toward the future Marcus was working to build. 1 month later, the former Clayton's Gas and Service reopened as Williams Fuel, La 68. Tommy, from the Montgomery station, had been promoted to assistant manager, working alongside Bill Clayton, who was learning, slowly but surely, to serve all customers with equal courtesy. The station's first day had been celebrated with free gas for the first 50 customers, black and white alike, and on the wall of Marcus Williams's Atlanta office hung a framed photograph, Marcus standing proudly beside the newly installed Williams Fuel Company sign, the red soil of Alabama beneath his feet, the blue sky of possibility above. It wasn't just a picture of a gas station. It was evidence of a promise kept. A small victory in a long war against prejudice. Next to it hung another photo, one Marcus valued even more. His 2 children, Malcolm and Ruby, standing in front of their father's newest acquisition, their young faces shining with the pride of seeing their name emblazoned across the building. For them, Marcus had endured countless slights and obstacles. For them, he continued pushing forward, station by station, day by day, creating a world where they would never have to hear the words, "We don't serve your kind here."